back to Welcome back to Seminary Reflections, the YouTube videos I do here on the My Seminary Life YouTube channel, where I talk about my just thoughts and reflections on seminary. I'm about a year and a half removed now from seminary, but I still try to think critically about my time there, stay up to date about what's going on in the seminary world and all of its various iterations. And for today's video, I wanted to talk a little bit about my ideal seminary. And this is something I've been thinking about a lot now that I'm removed from seminary, kind of understand better some of the critiques that people have towards the institutionalization of the seminary environment, the critiques of, you're just trying to mass market mass market pastors versus trying to shepherd and train up young people for ministry. Now that I kind of have experienced it, heard the arguments, and reflected on it, I wanted to take a moment to talk about what my ideal seminary experience would look like. And another reason why I wanted to talk about this is because I recently got a comment on my video about why you should not go to seminary. And when you're a sensitive content creator like myself, anytime I see a comment on a video on YouTube, I'm like, oh no, please be nice to me. And it actually was a very nice, very encouraging comment that this person left about how they were skeptical at first about what I was going to say, but really agreed with me, really enjoyed the video and really agreed with me on the issue of a lack of discipleship within seminary and how the seminary education should be very discipleship focused. And, we can even get into the argument about how, there's a good chance that it was never meant to be this training up of young people for ministry was never supposed to be outsourced to the academic world, that this should have been something that the church took hold of and created their own pastors and shepherds within their own flock to then lead their congregation. But I think when I think about now, what is my ideal seminary and how I would want it to be more discipleship focused, I think whether it is the academic world or the church world, trying to bring a more discipleship focused learning environment, shepherding, growing spiritual formation environment is what I envision as my ideal seminary. I think fits in both. And if you're very much the anti-classroom kind of person when it comes to seminary education, I understand. Part of the reason why I don't want to say defend the academic world of seminary, but one of the reasons why I'm sympathetic to that is because I know for myself, I like being a student. I talk about how on my seminary life and also on my other podcast, Kung Fu Pizza Party, that I see myself as a lifelong student. And you can learn outside of the classroom, don't get me wrong, but I enjoy being in the classroom. So when I talk about seminary reflections, I do agree that this probably should be something that the church is doing first and foremost, if not should have been the ones always doing it, versus outsourcing it to the academic world. But this is where we're at now. And there's just people like me, I know, who they like being in school, even though tests and quizzes and writing papers, they all get burdensome at times, but I just like being in the classroom. I'm not a good podcast host because podcasts want experts. I'm not an expert. I'm a lifelong student. Anyway, enough teasing. Let's talk about what my ideal seminary would look like, especially one that is more relational, discipleship forward focused. And to me, I don't know. I don't know of a seminary that is like that currently. Maybe you do. And if you do, drop it in the comments. So that way I can research it and, maybe find some further education later on in an environment that is more in this kind of discipleship model. But when it comes to this idea of what's my ideal seminary, I go back to my favorite class when I was in college, and that was on C.S. Lewis. And one of the reasons why I loved this class on C.S. Lewis wasn't just because of the subject matter, because I love Lewis, but it was because of how the class was taught. It wasn't in a classroom, and it wasn't... It was academic, obviously, but it wasn't just like the professor teaching us information at a whiteboard. It met weekly, once a week in the evenings at the professor's house. It was a small group, I think like 12 to 15 students max, because it's at his house. He can't have a class of 30 to 40 students. So it was like 12 students, 13, something like that, students all met in his living room. Each week we had one of Lewis's books to read, and then we discussed it more like a book club than a like a lecturing environment. Just kind of going. The professor had like questions already set up to kind of guide the conversation, facilitating discussion, if you will. But it was more so discussion based off of the book itself. Also had the lovely perks of it being fall time, so there was a fire going in the fireplace, and the professor and his wife prepared snacks and hot apple cider and decaf coffee and all that. It was fall time in Indiana. It was perfect. So along with those just like nostalgia bits of how much I like fall time, just kind of this environment of we're going to get together, we're going to discuss a thing, and we're going to feed off of each other in this small knit environment. Were there papers to write? Yes, I think I had to write 2. Were there presentations to give? Yes, everybody had to give one character, had to do a presentation on one character, and basically played the professor and had to answer questions from the students about the character moving on. It was very, very intense. My character, in case you were curious, I chose, we had 1 week on the Inklings, and we had to read the 2 Towers in a week, and I did Saruman. So that was a lot of fun. So that was kind of how the class worked. Week after week, we had a book or 2 by Lewis, the 1 week on the Inklings. And then in this close-knit environment that was more discussion based rather than I'm just giving you information right now. And not so much write all these papers, do this test and quiz, all this kind of stuff. So I keep going back to that as like, what would my ideal seminary look like now? Whether it's in the classroom or more focused in the church world, I would really like to see one that is more like this, where you have a professor, a pastor, a shepherd who's there to guide the conversation for sure, and maybe have like some reading or the occasional paper to write just to kind of explain your thoughts out loud or something like that, just to kind of like systematize your thoughts a little bit, but have it more in this environment where the students are giving and taking off of each other versus just the professor giving information. I've been in college situations where there'll be some discussion time in class, but a lot of them are like, the professor is just going to teach you. And I get that. I consider myself to be a teaching pastor. I understand the desire to go out there and just present information to people. But there's something about, doing it together, processing together, learning together when we're doing it more in this fashion of give and take and discussion versus just the professor giving a lot of information for the majority of the class, and then the last little bit you get to like discuss with the person next to you. So this is how I envision it. I think, from a discipleship standpoint, there would have to be that next step then of not just meeting up once a week at the professor or pastor's house to discuss these things. We'll just stick with C.S. Lewis. You're going to be shepherded or discipled by somebody in the works of C.S. Lewis, right? I would say ideally this should be less of a once a week with the person in charge and more of like a, ideally that daily life kind of way, like Bonhoeffer talks about in Life Together, of, doing every aspect of the day, living communally, speaking the word of God over each other as you go throughout your day, praying with one another as you go throughout your day, having family devotions, as Bonhoeffer talks about, in the morning and in the, I think it was like morning and then like a quiet time, individual quiet time in the evenings. So yeah, I would see something like that, something where it's like the kind of classroom-like environment that is still more so focused on discussion among the students versus just a professor giving a lot of information. And then the communal aspect that Bonhoeffer brings up, where, you're doing maybe not every little aspect of your life with other people, but you're literally in a physical community with other believers in a more, in a way that doesn't just meet on Sunday mornings or with a life group or a small group or whatever, once a week, once every other week. So that's what my ideal seminary looks like right now. I know in other parts of at other times in my life, my ideal seminary would have looked real different. Honestly, at one point, it just would have been Dallas Theological Seminary. That was like my dream there for a while, was Dallas Theological Seminary. And then there for a while, I was really into the idea of going to like a school outside of the United States, especially like Europe, England, Scotland, Cambridge University or Oxford or any of those. Still wouldn't mind if that were to happen at some point, although I kind of doubt at this point in my life that will be happening anytime soon. I could go to I forgot the name of the university, but there's one in Japan who part of their humanities department is that they have a whole center devoted to researching the history of the ninja. So technically that would also fit in with my lifestyle of my pursuits in life. But yeah, so I think at different points in my life, I would have answered this question differently, but I'm at this point now where I'm thinking more of community, relationally, and still trying to provide a little bit of that academic environment. Maybe someday I will fully break away from that and there will be much rejoicing in the streets when that happens. But still trying to have a little bit of that academic, but with more emphasis on community and engagement with each other, while still having some form of a pastor, professor, shepherd leading the group. That's all I have to say about that. If you have any further comments on this subject of what your ideal seminary would look like, or how you would maybe flesh out my vision that I have here, leave a comment. And if you haven't yet already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and like this video if you enjoyed it. And if you didn't, still hit the like button because you like me. I'm a great person. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.